The man I love is an anti-marriage advocate. He hates being tied down. I have prepared myself to spend my whole life with him without ever getting married, but I never expected that one day he would pull a calm, beautiful girl over to me and say he was ready to settle down. I've lost count of how many times this has happened. The first time was on Arlen's 23rd birthday. I was sober, but Arlen seemed quite drunk. That experience wasn't exactly pleasant. Arlen always likes to hold me tight and sleep after we've been intimate. But today, after we finished, Arlen sat her day up, leaned against the headboard, and lit a cigarette. I reached out to snatch the cigarette from his hand. "Don't smoke in my bedroom," I said. Arlen actually has a pretty bad temper, but he doesn't seem to show it around me. If anyone else tried to take a cigarette, he'd definitely get angry. But with me, he always lets me do as I please. Many people say that although we haven't established a formal relationship, and Arlen is an anti-marriage advocate, I might be the only one who's truly touched his heart. I never dared to delve too deeply into this, fearing it might end up being nothing but an empty hope. I got out of bed naked, intending to put out the cigarette and throw it in the trash. June Dubois. Arlen rarely uses such a serious tone when saying my full name. I stopped in my tracks, the cigarette still burning in my hand. "What's wrong?" I asked. His eyes, hidden in the dim light, looked dark and heavy. "Today is the last time. Let's not meet up anymore." My heart sank, but I maintained a smile on my face. "What? Did I not please you earlier?" "No," Arlen said, brushing a few damp strands of hair away from his forehead. "I'm planning to get married." It felt like a heavy blow to the back of my head. My hand shook, and the burning end of the cigarette fell onto my foot, causing a sharp pain. "How old are you? Can you still get burned by dropping a cigarette?" Arlen's expression was not good. He came over, picked me up, and laid me back on the bed, then turned to find burn ointment in my drawer. Watching Arlen move around my room, I felt like what he had just said was a dream. "Arlen, are you really getting married?" Arlen bent down to apply the ointment. His movements were careful, but it still hurt intensely. "Aren't you an anti-marriage advocate?" I asked. He simply continued applying the ointment without responding. "Do you love her, Arlen?" After finishing with the ointment, Arlen finally looked up. He was kneeling on the floor, and his posture was strikingly similar to the one I had always dreamed of proposing. "Yes." The taut string in my mind snapped with a loud crack, leaving my brain momentarily blank. "That's surprising." I managed to find my voice. "Arlen can actually say the word love." After all these years with Arlen, I had mastered the art of feeling a storm inside while maintaining a calm exterior. Arlen silently packed up his things. I looked at my foot covered in ointment. Whether it was the pain or the effectiveness of the ointment, I felt numb. Suddenly, a profound sadness overwhelmed me. I pulled him close, hugging his neck, and said, "I love you too. If you don't want to be with her, just marry me instead. How about it?" Arlen stared at me for half a minute, silent. When he spoke again, his eyes and brows were filled with icy coldness. "What are you thinking, June Dubois?" After a long silence, he spoke again. "We've slept together for 3 years and have known each other for 10. If I wanted to marry you, I would have done it a long time ago. It's one thing to know it in your heart, but hearing it confirmed by someone else is something else entirely." It felt like a loud slap across my face. My grip on the cigarette suddenly loosened. "I was just joking with you," I said, laughing as I ran my fingers through my hair. "There are plenty of men in this world. If Arlen wants to settle down, then I'm willing to drown in the water. There are many who want to come ashore." Arlen suddenly turned my chin with his long fingers, his eyes narrow, gazing up at me. "You're quite decisive," he said, leaning in to kiss the corner of my mouth. I found myself somewhat reluctant to let go of this fleeting moment with Arlen still by my side. "Have you slept with her yet?" I suddenly asked him. Arlen seemed displeased with the question, and the fire in his eyes gradually dimmed, but he still answered, "No, we haven't gotten married yet, so I haven't touched her." See, even someone as clear-headed as Arlen has a firm grasp of the situation. What I am to him, and what she is to him, is crystal clear and distinctly defined in his mind. Arlen doesn't belong to me, and neither does his love. For the first time in 3 years, Arlen left without staying the night. Whether it was the sound at the door or the thunder, the noise was amplified in my ears, making my nerves tremble. It wasn't raining outside, but my eyes were already pouring. I felt like a marionette with its strings cut, stunned and unsure of what to do. Confronting the departure of Arlen, something I had long anticipated but still felt unprepared for. Meredith's birthday was 3 days after Arlen and I broke up. We were all from the same circle and had been friends since high school. Meredith had just returned from abroad, so everyone came to welcome him and celebrate his birthday. I knew Arlen would be there. I missed him so much that I couldn't help but think that even seeing him once might be a bittersweet relief. It had been a long time since I'd seen Meredith. He didn't seem to be the impulsive kid he was 3 years ago, but had become more sophisticated and composed. "Long time no see, Meredith. Meredith turned to me, slowly putting down his champagne. His gaze was intense. Long time no see. How have you been? Meredith is Arlen's nephew, and although we're not directly related, we're only a year apart. Back then, I was always around Arlen, and Meredith would always call him uncle while hanging out with us. Meredith is also 2 months younger than I am, but he never called me anything other than June, which Arlen sometimes complained about. Quite well. I handed him a new glass of champagne. I had a very good relationship with Meredith. Meredith smiled, but just as he was about to speak, the sudden noise from the private room drowned him out. Wow, Arlen. Arlen is here. Arlen, who's that with Arlen? Wow, really, Arlen brought someone. I abruptly stopped what I was doing and looked towards the door. Arlen and his companion were standing there, holding hands. Despite myself, I still found his features breathtaking. If it weren't for the person next to him, I would still think the night before was just a dream, that I could still feel Arlen's heartbeat and warmth. But it was a fair-skinned, lively girl with a gentle and clean demeanor. When Arlen's gaze turned towards me, I panicked and quickly downed a large gulp of champagne. It was blinding, and I'm not talking about the lights. Let me introduce you to my fiancé, Odelia Stone. My heart plummeted, shattered into pieces. Arlen and his companion sat her down across from Meredith and me. Most people were cheering. Many praised Arlen's fiancé as beautiful and gentle. These descriptions had nothing to do with me and sounded like a naked insult. I tried to tell myself it was nothing and forced a casual demeanor. Congratulations, Arlen. Your partner is beautiful. Under the gaze of a few friends, I raised my glass to Arlen first. Arlen stared at me for a moment. He raised his glass. Thank you. This is June Dubois, a friend of mine, 2 years older than you. He turned to introduce me to his companion, June. Odelia Stone gave a sweet smile. I often hear Arlen talk about you. I was hoping to meet you and ask you to be my bridesmaid. I don't have many friends in Los Angeles, so I had to dig into Arlen's circle. I gripped my glass tightly to avoid losing my composure in front of everyone. I looked at Arlen, my heart aching, but maintained a poised exterior. Do you really want me to come, Arlen? I pretended to joke. If I go again, that'll be 3 times. I'd have to get married. Arlen didn't say anything. Arlen, Odelia Stone said, shaking his arms softly. Arlen's gaze was warm as he turned to look at me. We've been friends for so many years. Please do me this favor, June. My foot stumbled, unsure if it was from my high heels or something else, but Meredith caught me just in time, struggling to control the tumult inside. I maintained a smile on my face. Look at that, Arlen asking me so urgently that I'm startled. Except for my 2 informed friends, everyone else was laughing along. All right, I looked straight into Arlen's eyes. Since you've asked, I'll definitely go. How could I refuse you, Arlen? I love you so much. Whatever you offer, whether it's a knife or honey, I'll accept it all. After a few rounds of drinks, everyone was in high spirits. Odelia Stone was not only kind-looking, but also spoke smoothly and charmingly, blending in with everyone. Before we even got up from the table, someone suggested playing Truth or Dare, and since there were many people, it started. The first draw was Odelia Stone. Odelia Stone seemed surprised and buried herself in Arlen's arms. Arlen, I should have bought a lottery ticket today. Arlen gently patted her head, his eyes smiling. Don't make things difficult for my wife. My heart was stinging, watching Arlen protect her in his arms. Odelia Stone chose Truth. Odelia Stone, have you and Arlen been intimate? A friend asked first. Oh. Odelia Stone burrowed deeper into Arlen's embrace, surrounded by the pressing questions. Only I was gripping my palms tightly. How should I describe this feeling? It's like a gnawing pain. I wanted to hear it, but was afraid too. How shameless. Arlen jokingly threw a bottle at the person who asked, have you or haven't you? The crowd continued to stir. Odelia isn't that kind of person, Arlen decisively stated. The champagne slipped from my hand, and the sound of it shattering drew considerable attention. Among the onlookers, one pair of eyes were particularly intense. I knew it was Arlen's. See, I'm so excited by the gossip that I can't even hold my glass. I bent down to pick up the broken glass. Meredith reached out to stop me, but it was too late. Looking at the blood beads emerging and feeling the pain in my fingertips, I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. You guys continue playing. I'll take June to get her wounds treated. Meredith pulled me towards the exit. I was somewhat dazed by Meredith's sudden anxiety, feeling his hand growing hot as he held mine. Wow, look how nervous Meredith is. Almost everyone in the room turned to look. Meredith, it's just a little scrape. Don't make a big deal out of it. I felt a bit embarrassed as I pulled him back to sit down. You're bleeding. Come on, let's get it bandaged. Meredith was surprisingly strong. I struggled, but my efforts were in vain as he dragged me along. As we passed by Arlen, I noticed him glancing over at us. For some reason, his expression seemed a bit cold. When I looked again, all I saw was him reaching out to tuck Odelia Stone's hair behind her ear. Maybe it was the alcohol talking, I thought. Meredith pulled me to the front desk and, without a word, grabbed a first aid kit to tend to my wound. Hey, there's no need to make such a fuss. It's just a little blood, he said. Have you been happy these past 3 years, June? Meredith suddenly stopped and looked up at me. I didn't know how to respond, so I just forced a smile. Living well and eating well, what's wrong with that? But you, aren't salads all the rage overseas? How did you end up looking so mature? You can't fool me, June. Meredith's brief words left me momentarily breathless. Right. I had often pleaded with Meredith for news about Arlen. Of all people, Meredith knew best how much I loved Arlen. You can hide it from everyone else, but not from me, June. Meredith held the medical box with his long fingers. Let's head back. Being exposed like that left me feeling a bit ashamed. I know you're hurting. We've been through so much together. You don't have to pretend to be strong in front of me. Remember when my uncle was dating, and you cried on my shoulder for days? Have you forgotten? Meredith pulled my head toward him, and the intimacy of the gesture felt too blatant. Filled with comfort and concern, my nose suddenly felt a bit tingly. Let it out. Crying will help. Meredith's warm hand patted my back, and all the emotions I had desperately kept bottled up, sorrow, heartache, pain, came flooding out. I let my tears flow even more freely. After a few minutes, my emotions gradually settled, but then I heard a familiar voice. Arlen, they're over here. As if on instinct, I quickly lifted my head to look at Arlen, feeling guilty as if I had done something wrong. Arlen merely gave me a fleeting glance and scoffed. Wrap it up and get back quickly. Everyone's waiting. I quickly straightened up and created some distance between Meredith and me, but the sight of Arlen's arm wrapped around Odelia Stone's waist pierced my heart. Hey, Arlen, let them hang out a little longer, Odelia Stone said with a playful laugh. Sorry for interrupting you, June. Did she misunderstand the situation between Meredith and me? Well, it was easy for most people to get it wrong, but in reality, my relationship with Meredith was like that of siblings. Arlen's expression was still not great as he shot me a glance before walking away with Odelia Stone. When Meredith and I returned to the booth, his friends started to tease, especially one who was closest to him. Hey, Meredith and June are back, just in time for a dare kiss each other. I was stunned. I widened my eyes and looked at Meredith. Don't mind them, they're just being silly, he said, trying to suppress it. The game continued, but unexpectedly, the next round landed on me. This time, the chaos intensified. Kiss, kiss. I felt a bit lost, but instinctively glanced over at Arlen for his reaction. Would he even care? He didn't. He was too busy whispering to Odelia Stone, looking happy as they leaned into each other, seemingly oblivious to everything happening around them. I diverted my gaze back to Meredith, who was looking right at me. The noise around us grew louder, and in the next moment, Meredith and I turned back at the same time, as if we had coordinated it. I didn't know who pushed us from behind, but suddenly our lips met without warning. The booth erupted with excitement. I didn't really feel anything, but I noticed Meredith's ears turning bright red. What a kid, I thought. Arlen, you're hurting me? Odelia Stone's playful voice should have been drowned out by the noise, but somehow it reached my ears clearly. I suddenly found the gathering dull, and after sitting for a while, I decided to leave. Meredith, being the host, couldn't follow me out, but just as I stepped outside, I received his message. Sorry, June, my friend is a bit oblivious. It's fine. I quickly typed back a few words. Who's counting between us? As I walked, I reached the corner of the staircase, when a large hand suddenly pulled me aside. My heart raced, and when I focused, I realized it was Arlen. Before he spoke, I pulled my hand away from his, reminded of the entanglement with Odelia Stone, which made me uncomfortable. Arlen seemed displeased with my reaction. You never seemed bothered after all those times we slept together. What's with the urgency to distance yourself now that you've found someone new? Odelia isn't that kind of girl. Suddenly, I recalled Arlen's words about Odelia Stone. True, she wasn't the type. She was pure and unblemished. But I was someone he could sleep with without a second thought. My heart felt like it was being torn apart, and tears filled my eyes as I stammered. Arlen, what do you think of me after all these years? Arlen looked at me with a hint of disdain, releasing my hand, his lips curling into a mocking smile. Do you really have any idea how you come off? We're both flawed. June Dupois, I'm just here to tell you not to get too close to Meredith. If you think being friends with benefits is awkward, I'll make sure you can't even step into the Butler family home, even if Arlen has feelings for you. It felt as if a hand had ripped my heart out, and the pain was overwhelming. Are you done? Just go. His words were too hurtful. His tenderness and cruelty left no room for ambiguity, and I would never have a chance to fight back in front of him. I hurriedly walked past Arlen, my high heels clattering on the floor. When I reached the next flight of stairs, I suddenly stopped. Turning back, I looked at the man I loved deeply and said seriously, I hope you and your pure Odelia grow old together. Arlen, my only wish is that you never think of me. Not ever. I couldn't see Arlen's expression clearly, but I heard his cool, distant voice mingling with the sound of a lighter flicking. You really think too highly of yourself. June Dupois. After that day, I didn't see Arlen again. I thought we had torn our relationship apart. Maybe it was all over. Until one afternoon, I suddenly received a message from Arlen. There's an extra key at my place. Come get it from the coffee shop downstairs. My heart raced, and without thinking, I replied with a simple okay. After I sent the message, I looked at my phone, feeling ridiculous. My first thought was happiness at the chance to see him again, but I didn't expect to find Odelia Stone at the coffee shop. My heart sank. Here's your key, she said, breaking the silence. I was at a loss for words, unsure of what to say. I know about your relationship with Arlen. I heard everything you just said in the stairwell that day. Taking a deep breath, I finally looked up at Odelia Stone. We're done. You don't need to worry. I know. Odelia Stone didn't seem as soft as she had that day. This key was given to me by Arlen. He asked me to return it to you instead of finding you himself. And that says everything. I just hope you don't entertain any delusions anymore. June. I clenched the key in my palm until it hurt, but the pain was nothing compared to my heartbreak. Arlen had placed me in such a position himself, shamelessly entangled, and Odelia Stone, pure and pristine, was looking down at me, warning me not to have any delusions. I felt a lump in my throat and couldn't speak for a long time. Odelia Stone sipped her coffee slowly, laughing softly. Men always know the difference between the women they fool around with and the ones they marry. No matter how much you cling to him, it's pointless. She isn't clinging to him. Rather than wasting your breath saying all this nonsense, you'd be better off keeping an eye on Arlen. I followed the voice and looked up to see Meredith standing beside our table. Meredith, what are you doing here? Before I could finish, Meredith grabbed my hand. Just take care of your own business. Don't let me find out you're causing her trouble again. Even if Arlen has feelings for you, I have 1,000 ways to keep you out of the Biller family home. Odelia Stone's expression soured, and she immediately slammed her cup down on the table. Meredith ignored her and pulled me out of the coffee shop. What are you doing here? Meredith looked angrier than I was as he walked ahead. I stopped, yanked on him hard, and finally got him to turn around. You don't have to be this angry. I forced a smile. I'm fine. Meredith hesitated, wanting to say something. I really am fine. I'm okay. Really, I just. June. Meredith hurriedly wiped my tears away. I tried to control myself, but the tears wouldn't stop. I felt like a wild horse that had broken free, like a string of pearls that had snapped. Just like my love for Arlen was and uncontrollable, I clutched my shirt over my heart tightly. My mind was filled with memories of Arlen and me in bed. Him whispering, June, stay with me. Just like this. My heart rose and fell with those words. The start of my relationship with Arlen was far from ideal. 3 years ago, when Arlen got a girlfriend, I had a huge fight with him. Despite loving Arlen then, I found the courage to cut ties. Meredith and I were supposed to go abroad together for our studies, but the night before, Arlen, drunk, called me into his bed. I cried and protested, saying, Arlen, you already have a girlfriend. Arlen made a call and unilaterally broke up with her. I had never seen that side of him. It was as if he was ready to burn all bridges. I cried and pleaded, but Arlen still succeeded. I think my biggest mistake was giving in to him, letting him start those chaotic 3 years. That night was the first time Arlen asked me to stay with him. The next morning, I sat all day on the hotel bed, disheveled, while Arlen rustled around getting dressed. His ex-girlfriend barged in, crying and demanding to know why he had broken up with her. She pointed at me, naked and covered in love bites, and asked Arlen if he loved me. I will never forget it. Just moments before, I had made up my mind to be with Arlen forever. But the next moment, Arlen's words, I don't love you, turned my resolve into a complete joke. What did Arlen say? I don't love you, and I don't love her. Arlen laughed with an air of indifference, while the girl who was also abandoned cried, and asked me if I had any shame. I slapped myself in anger, but the words, I'm sorry, were stuck in my throat. I hated myself, hated that I couldn't refuse Arlen, hated that I had taken his promise of companionship as gospel, and hated even more that despite all this, I still couldn't get Arlen to say he loved me. So I stopped mentioning love in front of him. Arlen was cynical, so I became cynical. Arlen was reckless, so I treated everything as fleeting. Maybe, if I became colder and more heartless than Arlen, he'd be afraid of me. But today, the story repeated itself. Someone told me not to pursue Arlen anymore. I was dying of grievance. Arlen belonged to her, to countless hers, just not to me. You see, After another 3 years, Arlen and I would still be strangers. I just hardened my heart. The autumn weather seemed too cold. I cried outside for a long time. Meredith took me home, and I fell into a heavy sleep, feeling alternately hot and cold, dreaming of the brief moments of my tangled years with Arlen. At one moment, those tender, affectionate moments, those familiar faces, all turned into sharp, barbed knives, mercilessly stabbing into my chest, piercing through my ribs and deep into my heart. The pain was suffocating, and I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. There was a familiar presence beside me. I turned my head to see Arlen sitting quietly by my bed in the moonlight, blowing out cigarette rings. I didn't know how he got in. In the moonlight, I saw that Arlen's face was bruised, awake. Arlen's voice was hoarse from nicotine. I said nothing, just looked at him quietly. Meredith did it. He smiled thoughtfully and continued on his own. That kid has grown up. 3 years ago, he would have run away to Switzerland in defeat. Now he dares to take me on. I still didn't answer Arlen. You were dreaming about me, calling my name, asking me to let you go. Arlen's lips curled into a smile as he extinguished his cigarette. Meredith said I was bullying you. He cares about you so much, so it hurts him. The man still smiled. You know, 3 years ago, he liked you. If he hadn't seen us in bed together, he wouldn't have run off to Switzerland that very night. Now he's back and can support you. The blanket on my chest was soaked with tears, and I watched Arlen until my vision blurred with tears, unable to control my gasps and a suffocating pain in my chest. The person beside me just laughed and wiped my tears gently. His touch was as gentle as his voice, but I felt no warmth. See, you're crying like this. You think I'm bullying you, don't you? I looked up at him, so close, his features striking yet so cold. But you were the one who wanted to love me, June. Arlen's tone suddenly changed, the warmth gone. My nightmare came. True drove the knife deep into my chest. I couldn't help but break down sobbing. I clutched at his disheveled collar, making one last desperate struggle before dying. Why are you doing this to me, Arlen? I only loved you. Am I so sinful? Why? Why do you have to treat me this way? Just because you love me. Arlen laughed lightly, indifferent. You shouldn't have loved me, June. You shouldn't have kept coming after me for someone like me. Love means nothing. Did you know? Since I can remember, my dad has brought home different people every day, and my mom goes out and comes home at dawn. You shouldn't have loved me, June. Don't say I hadn't let you go. After that night 3 years ago, you should have left me, but you insisted on staying, June. I was sobbing uncontrollably, but he continued to gently wipe my tears. You love me too much, but I have everything except the ability to love. If you want my love, it's like asking for my life. My parents said they loved me too, and every person they brought home used love as an excuse. But love is just a meaningless thing, isn't it? I couldn't grip his clothes any tighter. My breathing was labored. Arlen began to pry my fingers off one by one, and my desperate voice and heavy breathing mixed into a crude, hysterical sound. But I love you. But I love you. I love you. Love isn't worthless. It isn't. I babbled incoherently, but Arlen remained expressionless, his actions merciless. I admit I'm attracted to you, but I will never love you, June Dubois. If you want me to love you, you're just dreaming. I struggled desperately, but Arlen calmly brushed my hands away. In the end, my hands were forced away from his collar, as if he had stolen my heart, leaving me empty and frantic. Arlen left. I tumbled out of bed, got up, and ran barefoot to chase after Arlen. The mud stung my feet, while Arlen, in his expensive shoes, strode forward with elegance. I love you. I love you. Arlen, I love you. Arlen, I love you. I love you. Arlen, I love you. In the dead of night, with a chill in the air, I ran tirelessly, wanting to catch him, hold him tightly, and be with him forever, no matter what. After running for over 100 meters, just one step, 1 inch away, I was about to catch Arlen, but I suddenly fell, watching him move further and further away, showing no signs of stopping. As if my last ounce of strength had been drained, I felt weak all over, crying uncontrollably, but still unable to stop wheeling the word love, like a final lament for this relationship. A few steps away, Arlen suddenly stopped. He didn't turn back. Only the moonlight highlighted his eye profile, making him seem even colder and more indifferent. And his voice, along with the October night's biting chill, pierced my ears. June, to me, the world is already corrupt. Love and sin are the same, so don't waste your effort. I don't want to commit sins or go to hell. I suddenly felt like I lost all other senses, only seeing the figure before me blur as it continued to recede. He kept moving forward, stepping over the corpse of my emotions, without hesitation or mercy, and that final figure became a dot too small to measure, and then I fell into boundless darkness. We went mad with love, screaming ourselves hoarse, and in the end, we became grotesque, pitiful souls. Later, I couldn't remember what happened next. When I woke up, Meredith was by my bedside. Sunlight streamed through the curtain seams, and the world felt utterly silent. Only the sting in my palms and soles reminded me that this wasn't hell. But still, the human world, 3 days felt like a long separation. I thought of Arlen again, recalling his words about the world being corrupt, love and sin being the same. I found it somehow amusing and laughed out loud. Meredith woke up in response. June. His voice was hoarse and tired, but I had no energy left to feel sympathy for him. When is Arlen getting married? I asked with a sigh. Meredith stood frowning, staring at me without moving. I kept smiling, though my lips were trembling, unable to control myself. When? In a month. In a month. As winter approached, I had just undergone a minor surgery, still feeling weak, but I put on a carefully crafted makeup and attended the funeral of Loia No. The wedding. I thought I couldn't let Arlen lose face. Maybe it was the joy of the occasion or his imminent departure, but Arlen looked indescribably handsome today. I wanted to imprint his features in my mind, but it was futile. As usual, I approached Arlen with a smile, holding a champagne glass. It reminded me of the first time I met Arlen at my birthday party. A friend had dragged him over, and Arlen raised his glass and said, "Hello, June Dupois, happy birthday." I wondered if he had been willing to come to my birthday party back then. Now the roles have reversed, and I was the one toasting him. "Hello, Arlen, congratulations on your wedding," I said. Arlen smiled calmly, as if we had never been entangled day and night, as if we had never fought so hard to part, as if we were still at my birthday party, where we first met. He clinked glasses with me, but said nothing. The next time I heard his voice, it was that I do too, Arlen, I thought silently. I had once been nameless and undefined, always by your side when you were sick, lost, or needed me, unwaveringly, willingly, even with pleasure. I am willing, because I love you, Arlen. The chimes rang, and applause filled the hall. This affair of fleeting romance ended amid the laughter and cheer of the guests. But Arlen, I still want to say the words I've never spoken. Although the world is chaotic, only love can redeem sin.
I fell in love with someone, and I owe someone, but I will never have a chance to make up for it. Arlen, on my wedding night, I had a dream. I dreamed of a little girl, delicately beautiful and adorable, calling me daddy. Everyone knows I'm not fond of children, but in the dream, I couldn't help but hold her tiny hand, wanting to hug and kiss her. When I abruptly woke up, I was drenched in sweat. It turned out that Odelia had her arm draped around my neck. An inexplicable annoyance swept over me, and I got up, went to the balcony, and lit a cigarette. I suddenly thought of June. I felt lost when I realized it. I shouldn't be feeling this way, I thought. When she was here, I didn't think much of it. Now that she's gone, it's just the same. I smoked half a pack before the ember on the cigarette burned my fingers and made me flinch. I came to my senses. I had been thinking about June. It was 2 in the morning. My last memory of June was her toasting me and saying, "Happy wedding?" She said, "Hello, Arlen, happy wedding." I suddenly remembered the first time I saw June. She was standing in the bustling crowd, and her face stood out. But what caught my attention first was her wine-red dress. Red is so intense, and I dislike it, not just the color but the intensity. I had seen my dad with his secretary, impatient and eager, and he had told me it was just passionate love. Love, passionate, isn't that absurd and laughable? That day, when her friend brought me over, I disliked her dress so much that I pulled a long face and said stiffly, "Hello, June, happy birthday." I thought that would be the end, but it was just the beginning. Today, she said the same thing to me, and I didn't respond. I didn't know how to reply. "Thank you." I couldn't bring myself to say it. "What are you thinking about?" The sudden voice broke my thoughts. Odelia wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. I flicked the ash from my cigarette, and I abruptly picked her up and carried her to the bed. I needed to prove something. After throwing Odelia onto the bed, her hands immediately clung to me, and I urgently closed my eyes and kissed her neck. "Arlen," she called my name softly. It felt like a heavy blow to my nerves, and I stopped, scrambling off her in a panic. "Just go to sleep," I said to Odelia and left the room. I shouldn't be feeling this way, I thought. My hand trembled as I lit another cigarette. It took several tries before it finally lit. Feeling the nicotine move from my breath to my lungs, bringing waves of pleasure, I let out a long sigh. "Don't take it too seriously, Arlen," I told myself. "It's just a flame. We've been together for 3 years. It's only natural to have some habits." I hadn't touched Odelia since then. My family was pressuring me to marry, and Odelia and I were merely tools in a well-matched marriage. We each got what we needed and played our parts, unspoken in the high society. I gave her face outside, and she dealt with her family. It was something we had agreed upon from the start. Get out. A lowly person like me doesn't deserve it. That night, I smoked a whole pack of cigarettes and went back to bed before dawn, sleeping deeply and dreaming no more. A week later, when I went with Odelia to look at dresses, she chose a red mermaid gown. It doesn't look good. Change it, I said coldly. Odelia looked a bit confused. What's wrong, Arlen? It doesn't look good on you. I lit a cigarette. My craving for cigarettes has been growing stronger lately, and for some reason, it's becoming harder to control. But I think it's pretty good. I said it doesn't look good. I suddenly felt intensely irritable, as if something was coiling around my chest, ready to burst out. The feeling was unbearably stifling. I stubbed out the cigarette. It was the fifth one I'd smoked. Odelia had, after all, changed into a different dress, but my irritation only grew until I drove to June's building. In the past 3 years, I've been up to her apartment countless times, and not once was the light off. But tonight, it was hidden in the darkness, with no light at all. I gave a silent laugh and lit another cigarette. When I turned around, it felt like I heard June's desperate voice saying she loved me. I spun around sharply and saw only my own shadow stretching long under the street lamp. Honestly, I had been thinking about her. I looked up at the pitch-black window and laughed even harder. What the hell is this? I'm married now. She won't have anything to do with me anymore. She's very good at keeping her distance. So, while I can keep playing around, I don't want to get entangled with June anymore. Just a flame, I thought. Really insignificant. In the circle, I hadn't seen June at any of the various gatherings for a while. I told her to leave, and she left promptly. Sometimes I think about June, and it's happening more and more lately, when I realized that my longing for June couldn't be quelled by cigarettes or alcohol. I knew something was wrong. I kept denying, doubting, then denying again, then doubting again, until I couldn't deny it anymore. I miss her. Once a fling is over, it's over. That's the rule in our circle. But when I found myself outside June's apartment again, I genuinely questioned if I was just a terrible person. I just wanted to see her once. I wanted to find out if this growing emptiness and longing, this heart-wrenching feeling, was just a fleeting impulse or something long-standing. I knocked 3 times on the door, but no one answered. After a few more knocks, a neighbor across the hall opened the door. Nobody lives here anymore. They moved out a month ago. I narrowed my eyes sharply. My voice tightened. What did you say? Nobody lives here anymore. A young girl moved out a while ago. The sound of the door closing amplified sharply in my ears. I licked my back teeth, feeling my heart sink, and then a nameless anger seeped through every part of me. Very well, you're just wonderful. June Dubois. I asked all my friends who might know, but none had any idea where June was. Eventually, I found myself at Meredith's place. At that time, Meredith was packing up things at his villa. I had a moment of realization, and the urgency and panic I felt started to subside. Did you send June away? What? Planning to run off together? Meredith gave a barely noticeable smile, looked up, and asked me, what does it have to do with you? Indeed, it had nothing to do with me, but I couldn't help feeling an uncontainable rage. This was the second time Meredith and I had clashed. The first was before we got married. Meredith came to question me about why I let Odelia insult June. I laughed. What did I say back then? What does it have to do with me? The Buddha says all thoughts and intentions are causes, and what one experiences is the result. Both Meredith and I ended up with bruises. Meredith wouldn't tell me where June was. Fine, I thought. How far could she run? As long as I followed Meredith, I would eventually find her. As long as I wanted to find her, she would appear before me. Before leaving, I glanced back. Meredith's face was pale, a kind of defeat I had never seen before. At that moment, I didn't know why. I only remembered an old incident. 3 years ago, when I was dating someone, June had a big scene with me. That drama ended with no resolution, and I was the clear winner. But when she came to say goodbye, I was just as irritated as I was now. She was still playing hard to get. I thought, a person who is genuinely kind wouldn't make a fuss about it, so I might as well indulge her and my own unnecessary desires at times. She cried and made a scene, but I was hopelessly involved, out of control to the point I couldn't even trace the reason. I just did it on a whim. I even broke up with my girlfriend at one point. She thought I was drunk, and I just played along, treating it as a moment of reckless abandon, without any consideration for the consequences. Eventually, June surrendered. She fell into a deep sleep, while I lay awake in the dark, staring at her. This shouldn't be happening. Arlen, under the moonlight, I studied her flushed cheeks. What was this? Driven by some strange impulse, I ended up kissing her forehead. The moment my lips touched her skin, I felt a jolt, as if I'd been electrocuted. I pulled away immediately, feeling disgusted with myself. Love is the most illusory thing, just like what I'm doing now, despicable and filthy. I told myself that she was nothing more than a clingy follower, Someone who would come back as soon as you waved. There's no real love in this world, just the deceptive possessiveness and lust of humans. That's why I said what I did the next morning. With my back to her, I could feel her heart shattering into pieces at that moment. Perfect. June, I thought. This beginning was so pathetic and unexpected. You should know when to stop and cut your losses, to avoid my inner conflict. But she didn't. Look at her. This woman has no sense of what's good for her. Since then, it was as if she had become a different person. I felt that she was increasingly familiar, but gradually, the lively person she used to be was wrapped in layers of isolation, turning into someone else entirely. Later, I realized that it was actually me. Over these 3 years, she became more like me, cold, heartless, and non-feeling. Even when I suggested anything, she calmly said she would rather drown in the sea than be with someone who doesn't want her. At that time, I found it all extremely meaningless. I couldn't help but miss the vibrant, passionate person she used to be. This can't go on, I thought. But June loved me too much. She couldn't live without me, I thought. Later, I realized how absurd the word thought could be. Meredith went abroad, and before she left, she gave me a significant gift. The paper was filled with words, but I only clearly saw two particularly striking ones. Miscarriage. I can't quite describe what I felt. It was as if every inch of my blood had frozen. My spine had stiffened, and the warmth was slipping away. There was a sharp, suffocating pain erupting deep in my chest. Like an explosion, the pain was so intense, it felt like all the nerve endings in my body were convulsing. How could she dare to do this? In an instant, that indescribable pain turned into a searing, overwhelming rage. I had to confront her face to face. I thought I sent someone to track down Meredith and flew to Zurich overnight. It was pouring rain in Zurich, the likes of which hadn't been seen in a century. By the time I arrived at Meredith's place, I was drenched through. I searched the house frantically for any trace of June, but there was nothing. My heart sank to the bottom. I grabbed Meredith by the collar and demanded answers. Meredith looked at me coldly, and then asked with an indifferent tone what I was losing my mind about. "Wasn't she with you?" I asked. "Where have you hidden her?" I demanded. Meredith laughed, but his eyes were turning red with tears. Seeing the redness in his eyes drained me of all strength. How could this be? June Dubois couldn't possibly have left my world without a trace. She didn't tell anyone, not even Meredith, whom she was close to. Why didn't she tell Meredith? "I'll find her," I vowed to Meredith. It shouldn't be this way. She was never like this. She was so afraid of the cold, and October weather was so chilly. She chased me barefoot for hundreds of meters, falling down but still murmuring words of love. She loved me so much, as if the world consisted only of us. She cried so heartbrokenly, as if losing me meant losing everything. She even said she wanted to marry me. She kept saying she loved me. She loved me so much. It turns out she loved me that much. I sat her down in the pouring rain, suddenly feeling as if I had lost all strength. The rain, mixed with the chill, was tormenting my already burning nerves with its coldness. Then, I fell seriously ill. I kept seeing June Dubois in my dreams, which were always shifting between icy cold and burning hot. She stood alone, looking around anxiously. Sometimes she would say she couldn't contain her love for me. Other times she would hate me to the bone, or she would laugh joyfully, only to cry heartbreakingly. It was all a repeated scene, asking me why I treated her this way, and if she had committed some grave sin. I would wake up from these dreams in a panic. It was to win the morning. The quiet night accentuated my frantic heartbeat, leaving me feeling lonely and desolate. It felt like someone had squeezed and twisted my heart repeatedly, finally throwing it away like worthless trash. The pain of being abandoned was unbearable. I had also ruthlessly abandoned her. No wonder she didn't want me anymore. What do we use to measure love? The pain after parting. The pain of not wanting to live, yet still yearning to repeat the same mistakes. It turns out to be both sin and love. I searched everywhere, but time kept slipping away. When I saw June again, it was 3 years later at Meredith's birthday party. I pushed open the door to the 1980 suite. June was sitting in the middle, looking at me. At that moment, my heart raced uncontrollably, and my blood felt like it was screaming. I hadn't even spoken yet, but my voice was already hoarse. "Arlen, it's been a long time." Her voice was like flowing water, and I was at a loss, my heart sinking even further. It was all too bland. "This is my partner," she said. She smiled and introduced the people around her. It wasn't Meredith, but someone else, a refined and gentle person. It hit me like a bolt out of the blue. All the longing and pain that had accumulated over the fruitless nights of the past 3 years surged at me in a flood, nearly overwhelming me, drowning me alive. She had a new family now. I was engulfed by endless loneliness. feeling unbearable pain. I so desperately wanted to drag her down to hell with me, but when I saw the relaxed and radiant smile on her face, at that moment, I dropped my defenses and was utterly defeated. That smile was too dazzling and warm, just like when we first met. She was in a red dress on the dance floor, smiling and nodding at me, saying, "Hello, Arlan, I'm June Dubois. I was meant to live in hell." Someone pulled me into the world of human experiences and brought me the pleasures of life. I should have been content, but instead, I foolishly hoped she would join me in hell. I hurt someone and killed our relationship with my own hands. I made the biggest mistake of my life. With no chance for redemption, I sent myself into an even deeper hell.
Meredith told me that Arlan got divorced later on and never remarried or had children. He said he looked for me for a long time and that he loved me. He asked if I was satisfied, if I felt happy, if I felt like I had avenged myself. I just smiled. I loved Arlan with all my heart and left nothing behind. It was intense and fulfilling, and I suppose I left content. Buddha said that everything with form is an illusion. Love is an illusion. Sin is an illusion. The joys and sorrows, whether they flow like the Changjiang River, are just experiences. It's better to sing a song, have a grand feast, indulge in love and sin, and let it all disappear with the dawn. This story has come to an end. Feel free to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the latest content, with new novels being updated every day.